This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world. We begin with a look at shocking new claims about an airplane crash that happened 17 years ago. More than 200 people were killed when TWA Flight 800 burst into flames just minutes after taking off from New York on July 17, 1996. The cause of that explosion has been in dispute ever since. Government investigators say it was most likely triggered by a failure in the plane's electrical system. But many witnesses say they saw a streak of light move toward the plane before the explosion. Now, 6 investigators who participated in the original probe of the crash have come forward to request that the case be reopened. They've petitioned the National Transportation Safety Board to reactivate its investigation. Their stories are featured in a new film directed by Christina Borgeson, a former CBS News producer. We'll be joined by her later in the broadcast, but first, we look at Christina's 17-year struggle to discover what happened on the night TWA Flight 800 went down. Her story is featured in the film Shadows of Liberty, directed by Jean-Philippe Tremblay. This clip also includes former Assistant FBI Director James Kallstrom, the former New York congressional aide Kelly O'Mara, and journalist Philip Weiss.
On the night of July 17, 1996, Flight TWA 800 was en route from New York City to Paris, carrying 230 passengers, when disaster struck.
Bringing you up to date, a TWA flight, a 747 aircraft, has gone down.
See in the water down there, it is the burning wreckage from that plane.
That day I was at CBS, and my executive producer called me down and told me to look into it. And it completely changed my life, shifted my paradigm.
As Borgeson investigated the crash for CBS News, many people reported something disturbing they'd seen in the night sky.
All these eyewitnesses said they'd seen something go up, then they followed it up to where the plane was, and then all of a sudden the plane exploded.
With different reports emerging about TWA 800, the FBI declared the surrounding area a crime scene.
If it is a terrorist event, we then have the challenge to find out who the perpetrators were, who the cowards were that did this.
As Navy divers were called to recover the plane's wreckage, rumors of friendly fire emerged.
That first FBI press conference I went to, some guy raised his hand and he said, why is the Navy involved in the recovery when they are suspects?
Remove him.
The Navy is a suspect. The Navy is a suspect. Why they?
Kallstrom just pointed at him and he goes, remove him. And then everybody continued as if this hadn't happened. And to my mind, we should have all pressed on that question.
It's military that friendly fire was not involved in this incident. And I used the strongest terms I could use. I said it was highly, 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 highly unlikely.
Despite FBI denials, Borgeson's research uncovered a different scenario based on the Navy's activity on the night of the disaster.
When they released the radar information, they only gave half of it. They cut it off right when you could see that there were all these military vessels in this exercise zone that was right there.
Not only were there ships there, but there actually was a live fire exercise going on off the coast that night. And that's why they had closed down the flight corridor that is parallel to the commercial flight path.
TWA 800 Center. TWA 800, if you hear center, ident. TWA 800 Center.
I think that was him.
I think so.
God bless him.
When there's a distress, you're supposed to, by law of the sea, go and try and help. These ships went in the absolute opposite direction, away from the crash site, and at 30 knots.
The search for clear-cut evidence continued, and Borgeson was offered a piece of seat fabric from the plane that had undergone preliminary testing.
The test had revealed that there were heavy metals in it that were consistent with a missile strike that went through the plane at a certain point where this seat was very close to. And Christina received a sample to do independent verification.
I mean, it was just amazing. How many times do you get hard evidence from something? I had no idea there was going to be any problem whatsoever.
As CBS News gave Borgeson the go-ahead to accept the seat fabric, she was close to discovering whether a missile strike had brought down the plane.
And I was looking around for a lab, and that's when the FBI called and said, "You have a piece of stolen evidence." To my great disappointment and dismay, CBS just gave it right back.
CBS has given federal investigators a piece of cloth purportedly from the downed TWA Flight 800. The FBI wanted the fabric because
CBS folded like an ice cube in the sun. They just went. They decided this is not a story we're going to fight for. It was a great moment of spinelessness on the corporate media's part.
No evidence has been found which would indicate that a criminal act was the cause of the tragedy of TWA Flight 800. The law enforcement team has looked at every theory and has left no stone unturned.
With eyewitness accounts of a possible missile strike still unexplained, the CIA produced an animation that was broadcast nationally.
When they showed that animation, it wasn't like they then went out and talked to the fishing boat captain who had seen something completely different.
Flames visible to eyewitnesses more than 40 miles away.
I did, and they said, "This is ridiculous. This does not describe what I saw."
As the aircraft descended, it produced an increasingly visible fire.
The video was shown on network TV, it was shown nationally, it was shown over and over.
To date, there is no evidence that any eyewitness saw a missile shoot down TWA Flight 800.
The press bought it. The press bought the government's version of events.
At the time of the disaster, Westinghouse, a nuclear power company and major defense contractor, owned CBS News.
Any logical person would go, well, where does the vast majority of their money come from? Government contracting. If Christina were getting too close to the truth, would they shut down the investigation or would they lose their government contracts? I mean, these are logical questions that you have to wonder. What's more important to CBS?
Ultimately, Borgeson's pursuit of what happened that night challenged the priorities of corporate media.
I walked into this meeting of news executives. I said, "Why aren't we covering this?" And one guy looks up at me and he goes, "Oh, you think it's a missile, don't you?" And I said, "I don't know what it is, but I'll tell you, it's not a straightforward thing. There's something going on here." And there was just this silence, and I was just looking out at this sea of white shirts. And as I turned around and left, I just thought, God, you know, my goose is cooked here. And it was, you know. I was out a few weeks later.
The government's official explanation of the disaster, mechanical failure, hasn't been proven, and questions still remain.
I can't tell you with absolute certainty what happened. When that many people die, you owe it to them and to the other people who are getting on those planes every day to find out what really happened.
That was Christina Borgeson from the film Shadows of Liberty, directed by Jean-Philippe Tremblay. Christina Borgeson has just made a new documentary, along with physicist Tom Stalcup, called TWA Flight 800. They'll join us after break to talk about their new film and the call for a reopening of the TWA crash investigation. We'll also play excerpts from the new film. Stay with us.